Most average people in the United States don't have the time to follow the news, myself included, which is why I wait until the end of the day to catch up on all the positivity and sunshine that the news media has to offer. Sleep is overrated anyway, am I right? I mean, seriously, why does anybody read anything anymore? It's always negative, clickbait nonsense, and it seems like people are never talking about how to solve the issues or offer up any sort of solution. They're just out there to ruin your day, and for whatever reason, they're the only industry where the more negative that they are, and the more they can freak you out, the more money that they make. Case in point, let's talk about what's going on in Texas. I saw glimpses on mainstream news here and there, and by the way, I intentionally try to stay away from my exposure to mainstream media because I think of them like the sun. You probably shouldn't stare at it, it's probably bad for you. And I noticed that not a single person on there, in any of these networks, had an actual expert on power delivery and distribution. All the people that were talking were just giving their opinions. There were pundits and politicians, and not a single engineer among them. It's kind of frustrating to me because I am an electrical engineer. I worked in Texas and on wind farms and actually had some firsthand experience in dealing with what's going on right now. And I figured, you know what? Why the heck? Why not give this a good old college try and try to explain exactly what's going on? So for this, let's begin with a local news media story. By the way, side note, everybody should go out there and try to support their local journalism as much as possible because I believe that's where more honesty and integrity does exist inside the media sphere because your local journalists and reporters have a vested interest because they're from the community they're reporting on, so they're going to try to get you as much truth out there as possible. So let's go ahead and look at the first story here regarding what's going on in Texas. And this one actually comes from the Texas Daily Star, a local paper which reads the following and explains exactly kind of what happened. From natural gas wells to frozen wind turbines, all sources of power generations have faced difficulties during the winter storm. But Texans largely rely on natural gas for power and heat generation, especially during peak usage, experts said. Officials for Electric Reliability Council of Texas, or ERCOT, which manage most of Texas's grid, said the primary cause of outages on Tuesday appeared to be the state's natural gas providers. Many are not designed to withstand such low temperatures on equipment during production. So that's point number one. The pipes froze. And in layman's terms, what they're trying to say is they're looking at natural gas providers and electric providers and saying, you gone done messed up. Aaron, for those of you who understand the reference, bravo. But when the pipes are frozen, gas ain't going to come out. Simple as that. Okay? The second is we should be fair in this instance to the natural gas providers and to the electric providers in general in the state of Texas. And the reason is because this is a once-in-a-lifetime, unprecedented events that are completely unforeseen. And people are trying to make a deal like wind turbines don't work or something else happened, and they should have all seen this coming. But, as said, these things do work in other places, like North Dakota, where they do use wind and they do use natural gas. The difference is in North Dakota, a place where I also lived, we expected snow and very, very, very cold temperatures at the exact same time. Okay? But in Texas, where I also lived, we were never like, oh, let me go outside. Oh, wait, I can't go outside. I forgot my snowshoes and my ice pick. Or I've never foraged through the mountains and the plains and the deserts of Texas hunting wild animals, okay, and chopping wood to try to find itself and conserve heat where I roasted their hearts and so I could gain their strength. That never happened. You know why? Because Texas is a warm state. People expect temperatures to stay relatively unchanged throughout the year. And if anything, it gets way too hot in the summer. Okay? And it's because down there, and I mean down south, it stays warm. You have an anticipation, an expectation that things are going to change because a once-in-a-generation or once-in-a-lifetime event is going to hit your state, and nobody's ever prepared for it because nobody ever prepares for the once-in-a-generation or once-in-a-lifetime event. That's just engineering basics 101. You try to prevent for the most probable conditions that are going to happen. A 5-day snowstorm in the middle of Houston that's going to drop temperatures below zero? I'm sorry to say it, that's just not realistic, okay? And in a way, you could give a pass to these companies for not expecting to happen, for this to happen. But Also, no self-respecting engineer in the state of Texas, especially in places like Houston, will ever call up their boss and ask them to weatherize anything. Maybe if they live north towards Oklahoma, yeah, that could happen. I could see that from my own personal point of view. But it's said, down far south where all of this got hit, no way. And also, I'm going to point out to the people who are saying, oh, this was all foreseeable, everybody could see it. These are the same people that are out there telling you that they saw Tesla and Bitcoin and all these other things coming well before their time. Yet they're sitting there talking to you and not aboard of their yacht. Hindsight glasses are the most beautiful thing on the planet. If people had the right solutions all the time and understood everything that's going on this planet, we wouldn't need to engineer anything. We wouldn't need to do anything. We just build it outright to handle all the conditions possible, right? And that's not the world we live in, okay? And obviously, Texas is changing. Now, whether or not this is going to be a long-term trend or something else entirely remains to be seen. I'm more on the optimistic side that this is a once-in-a-generation event and that it's probably not going to happen again. But you said, you can always be surprised with everything that's going on in the world. But as said, let's move on to point number 3. And I think this is probably the most important point in relation to today's discussion. If we look at the map over here, let us look at the specific grids that exist in the United States. We have the Western grid, we have the Eastern grid, and all by its own lonesome is Texas. What are you doing, son? You're way down here, and you're not a part of any of this. This is where the magic happens. For those of you who don't understand, or let me try to explain exactly what grids mean. So a grid is just like a gigantic circuit. The larger the grid, the more reliable the grid, because you can have more generators, transmission lines, and essentially redundancy built into the grid. So for example, if let's say you were living in like Pennsylvania and the local production goes down, let's say the coal fire plants, whatever, like go down, your local utility can always go to West Virginia and buy up power, okay, or anywhere else from within the grid, and then they could ship it to that state. Same thing here in the Western, if there's a power outage somewhere in the West, it's that states can buy and trade energy with each other. But Texas, which runs its own grid and is not connected to any of these other two in any substantial way where they could buy up power in bulk, has to rely all on its own lonesome. Now, I know Texas, you call yourself the Lone Star State, but do you have to be so on the nose with regards to your grid situation? As said, your grid is very situations like this, which again, once in a generation. Let's keep that in mind. As said, shows that there is a substantial weakness with this kind of layout. Now, I personally am a positive individual, or at least I try to tend to be most days, and I don't want to end on a negative note. So I'll actually offer up a solution and something that's already been thought up of a couple of years ago. The DOE study sees economic security benefits in a single U.S. grid. Now this addresses issue number 3. Connect Texas to the wider grid, and maybe take it even a step further and connect to the United States as one giant grid overall. This would cost about $14 billion for the whole grid. You'd build 3 high-voltage DC lines to connect to the grid. By the way, fun fact, high-voltage DC does not have inductive or dielectric losses, so the cables will last drastically longer, and in distances over 400 to 500 miles, they are cheaper to comparable AC lines. And so you would be able to sustain, a huge part of the country, or just everything. It said if you connect the entirety of the grid. And it has one extra benefit of increasing the redundancy and reliability of renewable energy resources, because then you could ship solar energy all the way from here onto the east, and you can have much greater redundancy, greater competition amongst all of the utilities. And as I said, you can build more renewables, right? That's one way you can solve this issue. And I will try to talk more about the grid and everything else that's going on with the future of that in this video. I think I can offer up some insights given the kind of work that I do, because I said I've dealt with this stuff before. And so that's just a little bit of food for thought here. And so thank you for listening, you beautiful, brilliant people. I will leave a link for this study below where you can find it and research it yourself in case you're curious. Be sure to like and subscribe. Leave a comment below. And as always, thank you for watching, and I will talk to you later.